Hello and good evening to everybody who's joining us live on YouTube for this launch from Nine Arches Press of two brand new books by Julia Webb and Tom Sastry, The Telling by Julia Webb and You Have No Normal Country to Return to by Tom Sastry. We're absolutely delighted to be holding this launch tonight and to be joined by special guest poet Daniel Sluman, who is author of Single Window as well. So hello everybody who's joining us this evening live, whether you are on YouTube watching us there or if you're watching us back later. We're really grateful to have you all joining us, and this is our springtime launch. I'm Jane Kemain from Nine Arches Press, and I'm editor and director at Nine Arches, and I'll be this evening's host. I'll be introducing the poets and the readings throughout tonight. We do have screen captions which are auto-generated, which you should be able to see on YouTube, and we also have a document with the poems, the text of the poems shared via Google Docs in a link in the chat if you'd like to use either of those options. And without further ado, absolutely delighted to be kicking off this evening. So in a moment, I'm going to introduce the poet Daniel Sluman, and then I'll introduce Tom and Julia as well. Each in turn is going to read a little from each of their Nine Arches collections for you. And we will then end around about 8:30 this evening. So our first reader this evening for this special launch is Daniel Sluman. We published Daniel's incredible book, Single Window, last year, and we're really delighted to see it shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot. This incredible book of poems and of photography, both by Daniel Sluman and his wife Emily Brenchy, is a really incredible, powerful book, one that is described as a collection which is incomparable and uncompromising, starkly realised. It's a book that looks at the reality of life for disabled people in Tory Britain, and also studies how disabled lives can explore it through disabled lives, how we can explore intimacy and unconditional love, as well as isolation and confinement. This book is a journal which really explores those experiences through the vision of that single window and the year in which Dan and Emily spent watching the world move beyond that window. A really incredible book which we're absolutely delighted to have published, and we're very excited to welcome Dan to read for us this evening. Will you please welcome Daniel Sluman?
Thank you ever so much. Thank you, Jane, and it's a pleasure to be here supporting Julia and Tom. Single Window was released, I think, about 7-8 months ago now, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a second, but I'm going to do what all poets do after 6 months of a book being released and read a new poem, because we get very sick of reading the same ones. So this first poem is about my experience having skin conditions as a child and eczema, and it's called Blood. Just like the trees that erupt in long summers like these, the bark tightening to split into a nimbus of shards, disassembling the forest's quiet joy, I have found my body unwinding like ticker tape over basins and bathroom floors. The blood rising like resin to the surface, tacky and sweet like a spoiled peach. My knuckles slick when I wake, having pulled apart the lid of my eye in sleep. My nails at my arms like a man on fire trying to stifle the flames, as if you can dig your way clear through to the other side. How every morning my body gives over its warmth in smudged petals on the sheets. I've left a galaxy of buckshot that you've learnt to blink over with dye, stripping constellations that map the path back to a childhood spent wrapped in swathes of sodden gauze, to stop the creases of my arms yawning open like the hungered mouths of baby birds. For 30 years, I have been open-mouthed at the mechanics of this body, the heart's winged flutter and the proof spilling over my fingertips. How all this time I have barely been able to keep this life within me. So as Jane says, Single Window, my last book, came out of a year of living and being kind of contained within one room. I'm an amputee, and my wife also has multiple disabilities. And before we even knew what COVID-19 was we spent the best part of a year stuck in our living room because we couldn't access the stairs. This is the title poem of that book, Single Window. We watch documentaries on mute from the sofa you've lived in for the last 8 months. The frames crash over us, the colors, the names, the stories rip and merge, and we don't sleep, or we sleep all day. When we finally pull back the curtain, a slant of rain is leaning against the road, slick with rotting leaves. Autumn smolders everything back to its roots, spoils it to a hazy gauze of yellows and browns. We count down the seconds before our pills sing their gospel inside us. We rock in our seats, eyes rolled back towards the heaven of improved conditions all animals must maintain, however small, however distant it becomes. All day we drink tea piled with sugar and wake in yesterday's clothes to this piss-bright sunrise. And our daily bread is to not let ourselves bend or break under the weight of this light. One of the things I'm particularly interested in, and I became interested in through that very difficult year, was writing through domesticity and writing through the smaller moments of life, the moments that maybe aren't celebrated as much as the ones we can write kind of epic narratives around. So the next 2 poems are about the kind of life we led that year. Ash. When I wake, it's with a lit cigarette hung between my lips, or loose, rolling past startled fingers into the blanket's folds. This vice of a cough, my plot of careless stars singed through cotton. These tiny wrecks in the sheet we shake out in the garden, letting summer pour through each blunder. Every lapse hollowed and held in fabric. Another week in this heat, and the junk mail piles at the door. Voicemails gather, spill over in our phones, and scatterings of ash mark a route to where I lie on the sofa, my body on fire. Dusk spills through the curtains and carves the room out with light. The pan of burnt eggs soaking in the sink, the stale smell of yesterday's weed. Huddled in the corner of the room, the inflammation flickers in your joints like a wasp fraught in the folds of a curtain. A single finger swipes the screen of your phone, drawing the last 2 years of our life before you, image by image. The sky outside swells like a bruise drawn through a poultice, and you're dug into the duvet, waiting for the codeine to bloom inside you. The pharmacology of love is guesswork. Night follows day here in diminishing returns, and all I want is to keep as much of you for tomorrow. Normally, I don't have to explain during readings that I'm an amputee because it's very visible. I had cancer when I was 11, and chemotherapy didn't work, so I had a very high amputation called a hip disarticulation, and that's something that I try and explore a little bit in this collection. And this next poem is called Stump. Like a saint, you kiss the sickliest part of me. Eyes shut. The rings slide carefully from your fingers until they spill and settle on the table. Ponytail drawn tight against your scalp. Your palms oiled. The fine hair on my stump glowing as you stretch your hands over all this hurt. The stunted hip bone and its crest of thickened scar. Your knuckles smoothing knots from the sluggish muscles that no longer flex the hip into a half smile. I imagine the phantom limb pouring into your palms like water. All the cruel words and shame thrown into the space where my leg should be, pulled out like barbs. This is how it feels to have your trauma held, I tell you, your kindness kills me, your grace kills me. Your soft lips pressed against this void kills me again and again. Being loved by you is like turning the volume up so high you can't hear yourself breathe. I make a point of talking about care during these readings because it's still something we haven't had a kind of a cultural conversation about. It's something we see very much as for people who reach a certain age or a certain point in their life. And the reality is that people of all ages and all situations require care around the world. We will all require care too. So trying to kind of destigmatize something by having a conversation about it. So this is a poem about the point in my life when myself and my wife were both receiving carer. A middle-aged woman peels off our socks and strips us layer by layer like she's fleecing sheep. The flakes swirl from my shin. The glossy scars on my arms, a reminder how deep you can cleave the flesh before the body asks the blood to swell. Of this lapse between what the body feels and the mind calls for in turn. She plies our skin with emollient thick as grease, and we are left to sit in our sweat like chops spitting in the pan. The quietness that gathers when she locks the door behind her, and this piece of furniture is all that carries us, adrift in our Pacific blue hoodies. Fingers shaking around our mugs as the gutters outside choke with ice, and we'll wake tomorrow in the same bare room. Our carer will come again and again to unwrap us until all that's left are tears streaming down our necks onto this sofa that holds us like a mother. I'm gonna finish this reading with poem from my second collection, which came out with Nine Arches Press as well, and that was in 2015. And this poem is about the desire to be in a body that no longer hurts, even just for a little while. Thanks once again for Jane, and much solidarity and support to Tom and Julia. I can't wait to hear their readings later. This is where we go. It's not that we want to leave our lives, just our bodies for the night. The childhood promises that refuse to be honored, the parts of us that weep in bad weather. We unfasten our skin at the seams. It buckles as our sighs bleed out the bright room, and we drift like balloons to the cracked ceiling, far enough to feel the bundle of nerves slip from the flesh. And we never go anywhere but through the open window, past the silver threads of rain, to the simple cranium of streetlights outside. We enter neither animal or neighbor, but the same glass boxes, to want nothing of desire or love, just the indivisible blink of wire in glass. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel Sluman, for that incredible reading. Those poems are always find me in a particular way, that they are so precise and tender. The sort of hybrid approach they have to documenting the experience of both the universe of the body and all of the pain and needs, and also the need for love, and the way that love is a charge that's central in so many of those poems. It's an incredible collection, Single Window, and I'm not just saying that as its publisher. It is a fantastic book. One thing that connects Dan with his fellow readers tonight, Julia Webb and Tom Sastry, is that we've previously published two collections by Daniel Sluman, Absence Has a Weight of Its Own and The Terrible. And it's always a real pleasure to be a publisher and to sort of see your poets over a period of years, to see their body of work and see what new directions they will take, and which projects and work they will develop, and how all of that will shape the future work that they take on as well. So it's been a real pleasure to see Daniel's collection, Single Window, as his third one in this incredible format. Thank you very much for that beautiful reading, Dan. And our next reader this evening, launching his second poetry collection with Nine Arches Press, is Tom Sastry. Tom Sastry's new collection is called You Have No Normal Country to Return To, and it follows on from his debut, A Man's House Catches Fire. To tell you a little bit about Tom's book, I think these are really elegant and assured and brilliant, sharp poems. They're poems that engage with politics, and at a never more timely moment are exploring the ideas around things like Francis Fukuyama's end of history, and the idea that we'd sort of passed the point where, you know, sort of there would be a sort of, you know, turmoil and change, and that we're finding ourselves in a 21st century that is very much being shaped by a great deal of change and turmoil, and certainly not so much the sense that one particular idea is necessarily leading how things are. So it's a really timely moment, I think, in so many ways for this book to be released. And it's a book that also fearlessly engages with the nature of Britain where it is now, in terms of both post-Brexit, post-colonial, post-lockdown Britain, with all of its illusions and crises of identity in various ways. It's also a satirical book for all of the large-scale subject matter that Tom's poetry engages with. It is really attuned to engaging with this scale that is both very personal and also very much taking the national view, and it points international view of nationhood and the myths, importantly, that shape and affect how we think of ourselves as a country, and how we think of ourselves as people, and stories that we tell about both nations and about ourselves. As Tom writes in one of the poems, where he acknowledges the age of enchantments collapsing on themselves, I think that's a really key idea for this book. It examines everything that's taking place around us, whether that's politically, in terms of climate, in terms of community, in terms of how we see ourselves on this micro to macro scale. It's a really fantastic, powerful read. It's timely and it's brilliant, and it will make you laugh, and it will possibly also make you want to cry. And it just feels like it really has an absolute finger on the pulse. For those of you who know Tom, you will know that he is a fantastic performer of his own poetry also. He has been described by Hera Lindsay Bird as the magician of deadpan, and was chosen by Caroline Duffy as one of the 2016 Laureate's Choice Poets. Since then, his poems have appeared widely in The Guardian, Poetry Review, and he's been highly commended for the Forward Prize. Will you please welcome our next reader for this evening, Tom Sastry. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Daniel, for that beautiful reading. All these poems have different settings, and I'm going to start on the moon. This poem is called The Sea of Tranquility. I didn't know what to get the old man, so I took him to the moon. He stood, holding up the line at the top of the steps, looked out and said, "There's nothing there," as if he was talking about another place he had visited before. I said, "Dad, we're here now." He pushed his fingerprints onto the bulb of my shoulder, let me help him down the steps, the needs of his body hidden in his suit. He was right. The moon was empty. We scratched at the emptiness with our dull pretense of wonder, but when, finally, the earth rose without us, the loneliness was perfect. I could not remember why. Back home, it feels so angry. That moment of silence was my gift to him. When he said, "Don't speak," he snatched it from me and presented it to himself. In spite of this, I let the magic in. I forgot about myself until we were back, standing on the step, turning the key on the dead air we had left, and my own absence hit me again, like a great wave, like a decade, all at once, like a wall, over and over. That's about as cheerful, I'm afraid, as I'm likely to get. So I'm sorry. I do apologise insincerely for that. The next poem harks back to when I was 14 or 15 in the late 1980s, and I knew several men and boys who idolised or fantasised about being in the SAS, and who would make no bones about the fact that the best thing they could imagine someone doing with their life was to engage in some kind of fantasy military operation of a kind that may or may not have taken place, and to kill people. And I found this deeply disturbing, even as a 14, 15-year-old, but of course I forgot all about it, as you do with these things. And then many, many years later, I suffered a traumatic event, and I found myself thinking about a boy I had known in school, when in the fourth year, as they were then called it, when I was 14, who attempted to persuade me with absolute earnestness that he was in the SAS and he had killed 3 people in a pub in Belfast. And I thought this was and I was trying to think why this person I hadn't thought of for 25 years kept popping into my head. And I realized that I was now in a place of fear. And what I was remembering was the fact that when he was describing being a killer licensed by the state, I didn't see myself as someone he was protecting with his gun. I saw myself as his prey. And that was what connected the two things. So that's what this poem is about. I don't need to read the poem now. I've given you the whole poem. So the actual reading is superfluous, but you will have to suffer it nonetheless. This poem is called "In the Stillness of His Moment, Deciding." The new kid in the fourth year was SAS. He'd killed 3 IRA in a Belfast pub. Although untrue, this was his truth, who he felt he was. A man, tooled up, with me trapped in my moment of seeing him with the gun, and him, in the stillness of his moment, deciding if I could go on living. The same question engulfed me last year, like a dropped sky. I brought him and his gun back into my thoughts, lived in that pause. The war in his head, inside the war in mine. A little nest of wars. The next poem is a short sequence of poems. They all are just 5 lines long, and it's not going to stay there. It's going to move about a bit, but it's going to start on the moon, where we left the last poem, and it's called "This Is Our Story." 1. The moon tour always arrives in time to watch the earth rise and leaves before it's sunk in space. How much loss could the people face? There are no inwardly unremarkable lives. 2. The future is your own country stripped of illusions, the cold average of human fate, an unscripted hail of events. What will your country do to make it make sense? 3. If a Home Secretary signs my exile and I'm not told, where in that moment am I really from? Meanwhile, should I take more care or be already what I might become? 4. Your colleague says, eat clean, stay thin. Other people's bets can kill. This time it's mild, they say again. To school a child, you go all in. They rake your steak, lungs, kidneys, brain. 5. The dead withdraw their names, sick of glory. Our leaders aren't impressed. Arrest a number in a ghostly raid, have the rest displayed in the shadow of their phrase. This is our story. I sometimes wonder whether in 10 years' time or whatever, I will be sitting in an interview room and someone will be asking me what claim I have to be a member of society, to work, to take my place in the world, given that I did nothing or very little about what is happening in Britain in the 2020s. And so this is a poem about that scenario. It's called Screening Interview 2031. Her accent draws me in. She is foreign and curious in a way we are not about each other. So I explain. She says, "Did you think it was enough to be kind?" And I can tell she wants a silence to demonstrate the power of her question. I shoot back, "What do you mean by enough?" Because there is no enough. That's her point. She pulls a sheaf of pictures from her folder, slides one across the table, says, "You could have said no to this." I pick it up. I can't just leave it there. She has her silence. Or this. Or this. "Can we talk about kindness?" she says. I was slightly lying when I said that we weren't going to get any more cheerful. We will in the final poem, but we're going to have a bit of fun with fun, maybe the wrong word. But this next poem is sort of a counterpoint to that poem. That poem is saying that just demanding that people be kind is not sufficient. But of course, there's an opposite error, which is to think that if you are right about something you consider to be the great moral issue of the age, you can get away with being cruel. And I don't believe that either. And so this is a poem that sort of balances the sentiments of the previous poem. And it's called Searching for the Last Word. No one will tell you that becoming themselves was easy. We have all escaped from silence to tell the world what silence is like. We say other people's voices are silencers because we want them to shut up. We're testing our rage to see what it does. The world shows off its new wounds. Once in a while, we stop to watch them bleed. Each silent shooter drops their weapons, which fall silently to the floor. We melt into the crowd, which is to say, into ourselves, still insisting we were bleeding first. Mostly, I read about this on my phone. I rarely watch TV, and when I do, I am shocked at how real it feels, with sound. Last night, a meteorite fell 11 time zones from here. One of the continents has gone and we will not see the sun again. Everyone is shopping. You can see queues at petrol stations on every channel. The silent people are visibly upset. In a few months, they will be dead. Everything on the screen will be archaeology. Meanwhile, let's drink. Outside, the last safe rain falls on the still green earth. The reporter speaks of the enormity of the disaster for which there are no words. He fears silence more than anything. The silence he fears most is his own. Watching him, I remember the times I ran my mouth because I knew There was only one thing I needed to say, so it seemed fair to carry on until it was said. I never found out what that thing was, so I guess it was probably something ordinary about love. And I'm going to finish with a poem much needed at this juncture, I think, about something which I think is really hugely important, which is finding, or rather noticing, the goodness in yourself when it appears. It's called Witness. An incoming train ruffles the air. A hat takes flight and my body responds. I stretch out a hat and it sticks. I'm going to start again. I got that word wrong. I do apologize, but I had just started. I think I'm going to indulge myself and start again. Sorry about that. Witness. An incoming train ruffles the air. A hat takes flight and my body responds. I stretch out a hand and it sticks. I see a hatless woman smiling, make the right amount of eye contact, return her smile and her hat. I can hardly believe it happened. It reminds me of my old idea of myself. Most days, I free ride on the mysterious abundance of human warmth, someone else to catch the hats when my head hangs too low to see them, or hold a stranger's drowning thought with their eyes. With good luck and good memory, we can unlock ourselves sometimes. The day after your next good day, be your own witness. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom Sastry. What a wonderful, powerful reading. I'm always struck by how the poems in this collection, I have gone back and read again and again and have known them for probably 2.5 years now, I think, since Tom and I first started looking at the manuscript for this book, and how deeply humane these poems are, how they are brilliant at thinking about our responsibility to each other, how there's a cold, chilling wind of history that's kind of blowing through them at various points. But there's always this kind of interlude, this kind of hinterland between the past and present within them as well, this sort of meeting point. But ultimately, that humanity that's throughout Tom's poems always sticks with me. Thank you so much. And You Have No Normal Country to Return To is out now. My colleague Angela has posted links to the book if you'd like to buy it from our website into chats. And just to say hello to everybody who's following us on YouTube again, we've been checking out your comments, and thank you to everybody who's been feeding back and saying hello to us. And there's been some lovely comments. Lovely comments for Dan. Gorgeous reading, Daniel. Thank you. Beautiful language and so much dignity. Stunning as always. Always a pleasure to hear you read. Extraordinary and essential poems. Thank you. And also some lovely comments just coming in now for Tom. A lot to think about in those poems. Great reading. Brilliant book. So thank you very much to everybody who's joining us on YouTube. We are reading the comments and enjoying them very much as well. So thank you for joining us this evening. And we are now going to invite our final reader for tonight, Julia Webb, to read from her new collection, The Telling, which is Julia's third collection. To tell you a little bit about this book, The Telling begins with the image of wreckage in a poem called Crash Site, and for me it's this sustained sense of focus, this almost forensic focus on trying to find out where the fault lines, where the damage lies, that really shape this collection, which moves us from childhood through to young adulthood, motherhood, parenthood, encompassing all different kinds of encounters and all different kinds of experiences, traumas and hurts, changes, fractures, and fault lines that are just sometimes impossible to bridge. And it also looks at how the stories we have, that we inherit, that we carry within us, the stories that change, the stories that can't be changed, the ones that we pass on, how those shape our lives also. These are really illuminating and brilliant poems. It's an intricately written book, which really is brave in terms of how it uses form and how it uses the shape of the page. And one thing I really love about Julia's writing, and something that I think has been present throughout all of the 3 collections that she's published, has been this adventurous, playful, ambitious approach to poetry. And always there's this examination, this forensic focus, like I was saying from the very start in this book, as in all of her books, on experience, on true life, on stories untold. And each time there's these fascinating ways of approaching it. Sometimes that's in the form of imagining different animals or different scenarios, different situations throughout the collection, throughout the poems, which then emerge and illuminate things in a really often surprising and brilliant way. So it's a real delight to be publishing this new collection by Julia Webb, The Telling. And I think you will enjoy this reading. As Pascal Petit says, it's a collection that probes what it is to be human. Something that I think throughout Julia's 3 collections, she's always been really focused on exploring. To tell you a little bit about Julia, she is a writer, artist and poetry tutor, and is based in Norwich. Her previous collections with Nine Arches Press were Bird Sisters and Threat. Her work's been widely published, and in 2011 she won the Poetry Society Stanza competition, and in 2018 she won Battered Moon's poetry competition. Her poem Sisters was highly commended in the 2016 Forward Prizes for Poetry. Will you please welcome Julia Webb?
Wow, thanks for that lovely introduction, Jane. Before I start, I just want to say thank you, Jane and Angela, for believing in my book and for publishing me. It's like a dream come true to have a 3rd collection with you. And I also want to thank Tom and Daniel for their amazing and inspiring readings. I'm going to start by reading the first poem from the collection, which is Crash Site, which is the one that Jane just spoke about, actually. One of the things I'm really interested in is how trauma is passed down through generations. My mum suffered a lot of trauma as a child, and as an adult, it affected her both physically and mentally. So it's something I'm personally really interested in as well. But they recently discovered that trauma can actually change your DNA, which I thought was very interesting. Crash Site. We remember only vaguely now the wreckage of our mother, her damaged fuselage suspended precariously between 2 broken pine trees. How carefully we had to tread so as not to bring the whole thing down. And everywhere, the stink of spilled aviation fuel, at least in the beginning. We never did find that black box, so it was always unclear exactly what had happened, and each survivor told a different story. But the wreckage was there for all to see. Seats and belongings scattered far and wide, things broken open, life jackets snagged on jagged branches. Though our mother's windows had popped out with the pressure, she sometimes talked affectionately about the plummet, but swore she could remember nothing of our other life before takeoff. Our first memory was the screaming of metal and the silence which came after. One thing that happens with especially family members is this sort of pull-push relationship that you can have with people, where sometimes you love them and sometimes you absolutely loathe them. And this poem is about that. We weren't as connected as we could have been. Some days the distance between us became whole galaxies, oceans even. Our voices were garbled as if we were speaking underwater. Fishes swam from our mouths. I did not speak shark, and you did not speak whale, but we each had harpoons, and we weren't afraid to use them. Other times, heavenly choirs hovered above us. The distance rolled itself up like a rug. Flowers fell from our mouths as we spoke, and precious stones, fancy cakes, delicate sandwiches with the crust cut off. This is real connection, you once said. And your words smelt like that yellow rose in our old garden and tasted like blackberries. My father says he has forgotten how to make a storm. And though lightning still crackles from his fingertips, he doesn't know how to throw it anymore. And he has become so used to the thunder in his head that now he hardly hears it. He just turns up his hearing aid or switches the radio on. The news is always bad these days, he tells me, as if it wasn't always so. I don't think I was ever able to make lightning. Though I carry my own thunder, it rumbles around inside me, threatening to spill out. My father's newest house is a house of calm, though he is still the god of rain clouds. In our old house, all those years ago, he and our mother crashed against each other and made the most tremendous noise. One of the recurring themes in this book is water. I think partly because we've seen a lot because of climate change about flooding, and flooding of domestic space is really a quite horrific and shocking thing. And water in dreams also signifies emotion. So I was really interested of that idea of using flooding as a metaphor for dysfunction within a family when things feel out of control. All that water, the house a floodplain, though we didn't know it, beds washing around their rooms at night, like boats broken from their moorings. The only light, a soft orange bleed through two thin curtains. As we drifted off, we could hear our parents downstairs, neither of them swimmers, struggling to keep their heads above water, the garbled voices of underwater TV. When Nanny H arrived, suddenly everything felt calm and safe. She brought life buoys and flares. She tucked us into bed at night, wearing orange life jackets. And yet, beneath her calm surface was a deeper water, a vortex that led to the underworld. And when she thought we were ready, she would casually toss us down. Most of the relationships in the book are between humans, but anybody who is a spectacles wearer will tell you that glasses wearers have a have a relation. Especially me, I have a love-hate relationship with my glasses. I can't live without them, and I can't wear contact lenses, but they absolutely drive me mad, and I live in fear of losing them. So I was kind of interested in that, but I thought, what would it be like if my glasses could talk to me? My glasses say, everything you say may be used as evidence. They tell me to sweep away the leaves that clog my eye corners so I can see the world in all its brightness. My glasses say, get real, sucker. Any fool can see life is a joke. They would show me a parallel universe, but they have forgotten how to get there. My glasses warn me, shark, shark, shark. Can't you see the blood? Taste the blood, they ask. Look at it, clouding the water. My glasses wanted to find Jonah. I sang the song we learnt in 5th form. We went down in the ocean. My glasses sank to the bottom with all the other debris. You aren't Titanic, they told me, but you sure are a wreck. My glasses like to see both sides of a thing. When I am with them, things get forensic. We have a codependent relationship. They need me so that they can see the world. Just got 2 more poems to read. Most of the relationships in the book are real, but there's just a very small sequence about imagined daughters, and this is one of those. DIY. My daughter throws paint around as if she were born to decorate. Her hair is full of it. There are blue and white smears on her cheeks. She is growing a roller where her heart should be. When she hears me fussing, she sighs. Mother, she says in her breathy underwater voice, learn to relax, can't you? But it's hard to relax when your daughter is penguining around on the ice. I am afraid she might leave her egg unattended. I am afraid she might slip off the edge or get snaffled by a seal. She is right. I do know how to fuss. My daughter, though, is fearless. Look at her up on that ladder, holding up the sky. So for my last poem, I'm going to read the last poem in the book, which is, I allowed myself to reimagine someone who's died, because there's quite a bit about grief in the book. And so this is about making someone out of bits of junk. Remaking Mother. I am making her from wire and string. I am using anything that I can find in the house. I am incanting her name as I cut and shape and glue. I am singing her back to life. Her eyes are buttons. Her hair is string and strips of polystyrene. Her mouth is a plastic milk bottle lid, red as a late summer rose. She hefts herself up out of the junk and walks towards me. I keep on chanting, keep on singing. She holds her hands out, pleading. Her arms are lolly sticks and her hands are corks, her fingers pearly-headed pins. Her body is a pizza cut from a box lid. Her legs are toilet roll tubes. Her feet are large round pebbles from the garden. She shuffles towards me, and I can't turn away I sing her name out. Carol, Carol. The sunlight moves across the window and lights up her face. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Julia. What an extraordinary reading. Those poems just really, every time, stop me in my tracks. They're just such an incredible mix, really, of beautiful observation of things that are tender and funny and very true. And that's often what is so moving about these poems, is the experiences in them. And that idea of poetry singing back to life is a really powerful one, particularly throughout this collection, where grief and all manner of things unspoken is just a little just below the surface so often of all of these moments in the book. Thank you so much to all of our readers. I'm going to bring them all onto screen now as well, so we can all see each other and see our audience. It's been an absolute delight to have you all join us this evening. I'd like to thank you for bringing such powerful poetry for your performances and giving such imaginative and incisive work, which really often picks difficult, complex, nuanced and tricky subjects, but finds a way through poetry of connecting as well and exploring ideas that are often really important and prescient ones. But your writing does it in such tender, humane, funny, brilliant ways. It's been a real delight to listen to you all reading tonight. So I'd like to say a very big thank you. And I hope our audience can join us also in saying a huge thank you to the poets. And just before we finish tonight, I'd like to say thank you to my colleague Angela Hickin, who supports the events and is looking after you all on YouTube on the chat, and to everybody who's joined us this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure to have your company, and thank you so much for all your comments, which we will save and all of our poets will also see as well. So we're going to give you a big Zoom wave in a moment, but just to say, if you do pop over to the Nine Arches website, these beautiful books, which are both behind and here in front of me, you can pick those up on our website, and we really appreciate the support as an independent publisher. It makes a huge difference to us and our poets to have your support. So without further ado, we're going to wave you all good night and thank you for joining us for this wonderful reading. Thank you again to Julia Webb, Tom Sastry and Daniel Sluman for their wonderful readings tonight. Good night, everybody.